And when I saw the rushes, I was very unhappy with what I had done in the scene. In 1962, when Tequila Mockingbird propelled Gregory Peck to the height of fame, he was universally regarded as the embodiment of virtue amidst Hollywood's temptations. Yet being the serene facade and warm eyes, Peck harbored a consuming obsession. He despised the chaos and hypocrisy of Hollywood more than anyone else. There was once an actor who walked onto the set with a suitcase full of alcohol and 3 snakes, leaving Peck so helpless that he exclaimed, "I can't work in a circus like this." Another even brought a real gun onto the set just to test the realism. A bullet nearly caused the assistant director to lose his hearing. And Peck was so angry that he left the set shouting, "I signed a contract to make movies, not to fight in war." Who are the stars that make Peck mad? And what did they do to make Gregory Peck lose control? Prepare yourself, as this story will make you see St. Gregory in a completely different light. Marlon Brando, the heretic with booze and 3 snakes. Gregory Peck nearly quit the project. The Missouri breaks solely because of Marlon Brando. Before signing the contract, PC was reassured by the producer that Brando had changed, becoming calmer and more professional. But upon the crew's arrival in Montana, he realized he had been bitterly tricked. Brando appeared with a suitcase full of liquor, 3 pet snakes, and a toy piano he called his emotional energy transfer tool. Every morning, Brando would sit alone in a corner of the set playing notes and muttering, "Today, I'm going to act using the color blue." Peck, a man who deeply valued discipline, began to collapse under the chaos. He asked in utter exasperation, "What the hell is he doing?" A crew member replied, "We're not sure." He says, "It's a new way to connect emotionally." But the tragedy didn't stop there. The stark contrast between the 2 stars etched its peak. Peck arrived on set promptly at 7 a.m., meticulously revising every page of the script, preparing for the big scene. Brando, conversely, showed up at 11:30 a.m. wearing a wool beanie pulled down over his head, cradling a live pigeon. He brazenly declared in front of the entire crew, "It will act with me today. I want the audience to feel the friendship between man and a free spirit." The whole set fell silent at the arrogance. When the scene began, Brando didn't deliver a single line correctly. He released the pigeon into the air, gazing after it with a distant look, completely ignoring Peck, who stood frozen with the useless script in hand. Peck was deeply insulted. A few days later, Brando began whispering his lines, making the microphone unable to pick them up. Witnessing the unfolding disaster, Gregory Peck reached his limit. He turned to director Arthur Penn, his voice pleading, "I need to see a psychiatrist." Director Arthur Penn immediately pulled Brando aside, barely managing to restrain himself from shouting, "Moron, this is a movie, not an exorcism. Gregory can't keep up with your style of acting." Brando just laughed, lit a cigarette, and said softly, loud enough for Peck to hear, "Then let him try to experience it." That evening, PC sat alone at the hotel bar while Brando was at the opposite end of the room. Only a few tables separated them, yet they behaved as if the other didn't exist. Brando was laughing loudly with his friend's wine spilling from his glass. Peck sat rigidly, his cold gaze fixed on his whiskey. Neither spoke a word, but the silence was thicker than hatred. Years later, when asked about Gregory Peck, Brando just curled his lip and replied curtly, "Greg is like a statue of victory, handsome, cold, and soulless." And when Brando passed away, a reporter asked Peck if he felt any regret. Peck paused, then replied very quickly, "No, he deserved it." Strando was gone, but the storm he left behind was far from over. Gregory Peck thought he would never have to endure another chaotic presence on set until he met the next one. Music: Frank Sinatra, the careless star who drove Peck mad. Frank Sinatra and Gregory Peck had an almost physical confrontation on the set of Captain Newman, MD. Peck was the kind of actor who arrived at the set at 6 a.m. Sinatra was the opposite. He often arrived after lunch, sometimes still smelling of alcohol, forcing the crew to wait until 11:30 a.m. However, No one on the crew, from director David Miller to the lighting and sound technicians, dared to object or urge Sinatra on. Sinatra was then at the peak of his power, not only as an Oscar-winning actor, but also as a global cultural icon with a legendary singing career. Sinatra's lack of professionalism was an insult to Peck. Thus, when Sinatra arrived late and indifferent, Peck quietly told the director, "If he isn't sober, I'm quitting this film." Director Miller, fully aware of Sinatra's power, could only plead, "Greg, this is Sinatra. You don't want to die, so don't provoke him." For a lounge singer like Sinatra, filmmaking was merely a pastime. During one scene, while Peck was intensely immersed in his acting, Sinatra deliberately broke the atmosphere by whistling and spitting repeatedly. Peck stopped, looked straight at Sinatra, who merely sneered. "Sorry, St. Gregory." When a naive assistant commented that Peck really resembles a priest, Sinatra laughed out loud, raised his glass, and scoffed. "A priest? No, he's St. Gregory, the most boring saint in Hollywood." The tension truly erupted during the final dialogue scene. Sinatra arrived 3 hours late, reeking of whiskey. When the director prompted him, he roared, "I don't need this. I've sung at Caesar's Palace. I know what emotion is." Peck picked up the script, placed it back in front of Sinatra, and said softly, "This isn't a nightclub, we're acting." Sinatra looked at Peck, sneered. "Then go make the movie alone." Though Peck completed his role, he never looked in Sinatra's direction during their shared scenes. Even after the film's release, Gregory refused every press conference attended by Sinatra. Ironically, this very conflict created a magnetic pole on screen. One critic wrote, "Peck provides control and Sinatra provides chaos. Combine those two and you get a stunning dynamic." Later, when asked about his time filming Captain Newman M. Deep Side, Frank was talented, but utterly horrible. In a final interview, when asked if he would ever work with Sinatra again, PC simply smiled. "I'd rather act with an empty chair. It won't spit in people's faces." But Frank Sinatra was just the beginning. A few years later, Gregory Peck would face another man, one he called the most terrible experience of his life. Richard Burton, PC's most terrible experience. For Gregory Peck, his only encounter with Richard Burton was the most terrible experience he ever had to endure. They met at a lavish party in Beverly Hills. Burton strode in Scotch glass in hand, his voice booming as if performing an epic play. When they may introduce Gregory Peck as the man who gave cinema the image of a Takis Finch, Burton began to laugh loudly, announcing his drunken state to the crowd. Gregory Peck isn't an actor. He's a human rights speech wrapped in an expensive suit. The whole room burst into delighted laughter at this public display of arrogance. But it didn't stop there. In subsequent parties, Burton continued to mock Peck, calling him St. Gregory, or the man who pretends to live virtuously. Even when asked about Gregory Peck in interviews, Burton chuckled. He acts as if he's giving a speech at the United Nations. In 1965, when Burton was at his peak, a film project invited both him and Peck to collaborate. The script was sent to Peck first. PC read only a few pages, threw it onto the table, and said coldly, "I can act with anyone except for an arrogant jerk like him." The project was canceled within 48 hours. PC's professionalism and reputation had terminated the possibility of collaboration, dealing a severe blow to Burton's arrogance. Later, Burton confided to a British journalist that he hated Peck to his core because of PC's impossibly good reputation. PC is a widely accepted lie. Burton scoffed. He openly displayed all his vices and flaws, from drinking and scandalous affairs to outbursts on stage. For Burton, that was the truth of art and life. But Peck was the opposite. He seemed never to stumble. Burton viewed this perfection as an act of cruel deception against himself. "Every time I see PC's face, I want to vomit." Burton said, "He is my conscience, the shame I always try to deny. He proves that one can live without madness, without alcohol, without sin, and that drives me insane. I hate what he forces me to see about myself. In 1984, Richard Burton passed away. The next day, major newspapers reprinted Burton's old quote as a symbol of arrogance. A reporter sought out Peck, asking if he wished to share anything. He gazed into the distance, replying slowly, "A man like Burton doesn't need me to say anything more." If Frank Sinatra tested his patience, the next person was even more detestable. It was a symbolic showdown between two souls representing the two halves of America. Music 4. John Wayne, the two opposing souls of America. John Wayne and Gregory Peck hated each other to the core. Wayne openly supported the Vietnam War. Conversely, PC signed petitions against the war and advocated for civil rights. Therefore, in Wayne's eyes, Gregory Peck was a weakling masquerading as a moralist. That simmering confrontation erupted at a Los Angeles party in 1971. Wayne, wearing a leather shirt, stood amidst the crowd of producers and Hollywood stars, raised his glass and growled, "If America were full of people like Gregory Peck, we'd have lost before the first shot was fired." The room burst into laughter, but only for a moment before the atmosphere darkened. Gregory Peck, sitting at a distant table, calmly sipped his wine. Then he stood up and said, "And if AIM